Chapter. We're going to talk about assessment today. Assessment's real controversial, especially where I'm involved, when I'm involved. A lot of my colleagues think that I'm too lenient, especially on time, but I don't know. And I don't use my tests as tests. I use my tests as reviews. Um, and it seems to work for me. My students don't seem to complain. I hope anyway. If you don't think I'm teaching you anything, then you need to tell me and I'll change. But assessment's real important. Assessment has to do with trying to figure out if your students are actually learning what they're supposed to be learning. So we're going to talk about assessment today. If I can figure this out, there we go. And don't ask me why I have the horse in the picture, but he shows up. He'll show up again. American society continues to demand that today's teachers use assessment to guide, document, and promote effective learning. Our views on what are the most appropriate assessment tools are changing. One of the primary reasons for educational assessments is to help teachers measure learning outcomes. Are the students learning what I want them to learn? Proper assessment can provide teachers with valuable information regarding how students learn lesson material. This in turn can help teachers modify instruction to better meet the specific needs of each student. It is important to realize that this is frequently not how assessments are being used. Assessments used to monitor instructional progress typically fall under the general heading of either formative or summative assessment. Formative assessments provide information on learning progress. These assessments are not typically viewed as a single event, but rather occur multiple times. In other words, they would be tests. In my case, I use discussions, uh, papers. What else do we use? Quizzes. Those are all formative assessments. These assessments are not typical. Okay. The reason for formative assessments is that they provide the teacher with information on how the student is forming an understanding of the material. This provides an opportunity to modify instruction while the student is still acquiring the information. And then you can change it if you need to. You can slow things down or speed things up, however is whatever is working the best. Making instructional changes as learning progresses creates opportunities for improvement and ultimately better test scores. Summative assessments are designed to test whether the students achieve the desired learning outcome, and these usually come at the end of a semester of a section. Um, Recently, these tests have become more controversial as teachers and school districts rely more heavily on this type of testing to meet greater societal demand for accountability. And this is what No Child Left Behind uh, brought forth. The idea was that students aren't learning anything, and so you need to make sure that the students are actually learning what we think what they should be learning. And so they started creating tests to make sure that people were getting the information that they needed. I can remember when my daughter was teaching down in Florida, one of the things that happened to her is that they had I can't remember what they called them. They Into the semester or into the year tests that all of her students took, and if a select number of a select percentage of her students passed, then she'd get a bonus at the end of the year. And it was just a test that covered all the material that she was supposed to have covered in that class. As strange as that is, and they were just general tests, and she was teaching in the sciences, and she got the bonus every year because she's a good teacher, and she presents material in a way that the students remember. Summative assessments are indeed a valuable part of the overall educational process, but not when used in isolation. It is important to know if a student has met an educational objective, but it is just as important to know how the student constructed their understanding of the material, the formative assessment. As you can see, measuring and monitoring learning requires a comprehensive assessment program, so you have to use both formative and summative assessments. The instructional process should begin with clearly defined instructional goals. These goals are central to the educational process because they set the framework for what happens in the classroom. Often a teacher in isolation develops these goals, but increasingly educational goals are being developed by groups of teachers, perhaps an entire academic department, or by teachers and administrators to satisfy state educational standards. And the state educational standards have been changing and have been getting more complex with time because the Department of Education, depending on whether it's a Democrat or Republican administration, becomes more and less stringent as to what they are looking for. Um, and this is getting more and more complicated. One of the things we may see with the next Trump administration is that educational standards and goals become more standardized. In other words, everybody has to be looking for the same thing, giving less flexibility to the teachers. Once educational goals have been defined, it is important to assess students to determine their level of achievement relative to the goals. Here we find assessments used with greater frequency. Teachers may give new students a standardized test at the beginning of the term to determine achievement level. Other teachers may take more personable approaches, beginning the year with a series of projects and informal group activities to determine how much the students know. What is important is that teachers are using assessments not to determine the end product of learning, the summative assessments, but to help form an understanding of how students are likely to progress through the curriculum. This makes it possible for the teacher to design instruction that is genuinely sensitive to the needs of the students, rather than a one-size-fits-all curriculum, which is normally the way that we do things. And the reason we do things that way is because we're teaching a large number of students, and because we have so many students, if we designed instruction so that it was sensitive to the front row of students and not the back row of students, we'd just be teaching the front row. So in order to teach everyone, what we need to do is come up with an amalgamation of what students need. So the students in front may not be getting the information that they need, but the students in the back are. That isn't really going to work. So what we need to do is create a curriculum that fits both the front row and the back row. And when I say front row and back row, what I'm talking about is usually if you allow the students to sit wherever they want, the students in the front are more serious, and the students that are way in the back tend to be less serious. But you need to teach them all, every single one of them, not only the front row, but the kids in the back and the kids in the middle, of course. After teachers understand a student's learning needs and how they are going to approach the instruction, effective education can begin. There is considerable work completed before teachers ever begin instruction. This work is crucial to educational success. Once instruction begins, the teacher should continue to make use of frequent formative assessments. These assessments further guide and tailor instruction to the specific needs of students. The teacher may be unsatisfied with a particular student's progress. The student may fail to learn the material, or the student may learn the material more quickly than expected. Either situation requires further attention. Recognizing learning differences is difficult. Some students may have a history of learning challenges, but others may have progressed satisfactorily in prior grades and suddenly experience difficulties. The effective use of frequent formative assessments helps identify these students. Teachers begin to help these students by modifying the curricular approach to better meet the needs of the students. Diagnostic assessments are conducted for the specific purpose of identifying why a student is struggling academically. Combined with the existing formative assessment data, the pre-referral team can design a more comprehensive education plan, drawing from the unique specializations of the entire team. And when we're talking about the pre-referral team, we're talking about a group of individuals. Potentially, it's it's the teacher, of course, special education teacher, the administration, and the counselor that works with the school. Using the pre-referral team's educational recommendations, the teacher is in a better position to help guide the student toward educational success. And usually we're talking about a singular student here. We're not talking about a whole classroom full of students that aren't getting it. If that's the case, then the teacher can just change the curriculum, make it simpler, or go over something again. This process often decreases unnecessary referrals to the special education program. And this has been a problem in the past in that when a student had a problem in a select class, they would just send them in for a diagnosis, and they may end up in special education. But in a lot of cases, with a little tweaking, with a little change in the way that they present material, a lot of times they will not need to send this student to the special education program. Still, even with the help of a pre-referral team, some students require the specialized care provided by the special education program. Now, the thing about the pre-referral team, not all schools will use a pre-referral team. Some schools try to keep students out of the special education classes by just passing them along. It is not only important to monitor the learning of students with different learning abilities, but also to monitor students from diverse backgrounds. Such monitoring helps ensure the achievement of educational potential, regardless of personal and social circumstances, including factors such as gender, ethnic origin, indigenous background, immigrant status, sexual orientation, gender identity, special education needs, and giftedness. When my children were when they were teaching in Florida, one of the interesting things that they ran into was the fact that a lot of the students were immigrant students, were first generation immigrant students. So their English skills were not that good. Florida had passed a law saying that English as a second language was not going to be taught in their schools. So they had to try to educate the students as best they could, despite the fact that they couldn't speak, the students couldn't speak English, or not very well anyway. And they would take classes as if they could speak English, and usually they didn't do very well. Well, it's kind of interesting because despite the fact that they weren't allowed to have a educational, they weren't allowed to educate them in their primary language. My son actually speaks Spanish, and so he was able to help the students who didn't speak English. It was kind of interesting because they got an influx of Haitian students that came in. And of course, Haitians don't speak Spanish, they speak French. And that was a little unnerving for everybody. They were used to Venezuelans coming in, and Cubans, and Puerto Ricans, and Dominicans coming in. And they were actually so Spanish was one of those languages that helped them a lot, but in this case, of course, they needed French speakers. and that changed things markedly. Monitoring and evaluation are integral to enhancing equity and inclusion within education systems. Identifying disparities, monitoring activities can help identify disparities in educational access, retention, and performance among students from diverse backgrounds. By collecting data on various student demographics, educational systems can pinpoint where inequalities exist. Informing policy and practice, evaluation provides evidence to inform policies and practices. This data-driven approach ensures that interventions are tailored to address the specific needs of underrepresented or disadvantaged groups. And that is the idea anyway. So the real question is, who are they going to focus on? So if you, in the case of the immigration situation in Florida, they were focusing on people that spoke Spanish, and here they had this huge influx of Haitian refugees coming from Haiti. And so who did they continue to focus on? Well, of course, they continued to focus on the Spanish-speaking population. Assessment of interventions by evaluating the effectiveness of educational strategies and programs designed to promote equity and inclusion. Systems can understand what works, what doesn't, and why leading to continuous improvement. And of course, that's what we're hoping for. Accountability, regular monitoring holds educational institutions accountable for their progress toward equity and inclusion goals. This can motivate systematic change and resource allocation to where it's most needed. Engagement with stakeholders, monitoring and evaluation processes often involve various stakeholders, including students, parents, educators, and community members. This inclusion approach can foster a shared commitment to equity and inclusion. Hopefully that's what they're after. Some school districts have had a problem with community members trying to get rid of immigrant populations, trying to denigrate immigrant populations that they don't want to see in their community. And this has been a problem. That's one of the things that happened. I don't know if you were listening during the election, but they were claiming that Haitian refugees in Springfield, Ohio, were capturing and killing and eating dogs and cats, pet dogs and cats in the town. The idea, of course, being that not only that, but the Trump campaign was attacking Venezuelans in Aurora, Colorado. They were attacking immigrants from all over, saying that they were coming in and they were criminals. Highlighting best practices, evaluations can highlight successful strategies and programs, providing a roadmap for other institutions to follow and adapt according to their context. Personalizing education, monitoring student progress allows for more personalized educational experience that can cater to the unique needs and learning styles of each student, which is essential for an inclusive environment. Promoting cultural competence through evaluation, educational systems can assess the cultural competence of their staff and curricula, ensuring that they reflect and respect the diversity of the student population. And of course, you can look at your own textbook and see how often they refer to indigenous populations. And that was the first time on this chapter. In chapter 15, they've referred to indigenous populations. So, and you know, I have had a problem with educational psychology in the past, in that I can't find an adequate textbook. And I was teaching on the Fort Belknap Reservation up in Montana, and I was looking for a good textbook, and I couldn't find one. So when I was tasked with teaching this class, I asked lots and lots of people if they could suggest a good textbook, and nobody gave me a good textbook. So I hope you don't mind getting a free textbook. This is a brand new textbook that won't come out until next year, actually, 2025. And I didn't really have much of an opportunity to look through it until because it hadn't been published yet before I adopted it. So I don't know. You guys can, if you don't like the textbook, then you need to tell me. The problem that I have found is that there aren't a lot of really good educational psychology textbooks that I have been able to find. Even people teaching the class don't seem to have any suggestions. It was really odd. So I'm not exactly sure what Dr. Begay was doing, Dr. Marilyn Begay. But well, I don't know. I don't know. This is about the best educational psychology textbook that I have that I've seen. Is it culturally competent? They do talk about immigrants a lot. He does talk about immigrants a lot. Um, it's like I said, it's about the best one that I've ever used. Um, so and there's two schools of thought on educational psychology. Are you teaching? There's two different branches of educational psychology. One is for teachers, and the other is for psychologists learning how people learn. And it's sometimes referred to as the psychology of learning. Um, I'm not exactly sure if which this is supposed to be, but I assumed that we were talking about individuals that want to go into counseling, educational counseling. And that's why I teach the class the way I do, so that it's more focused on teachers and learning. Because my idea is that one of the reasons people are taking this class is because they may potentially want to become a educational psychologist. So, and I left the M out of competence. Okay, way to go. Assessments and students. Assessments help teachers measure and monitor learning, but they also help students. Uh, it, if used appropriately, assessments can encourage student engagement in learning, providing a source of motivation to improve. And this is kind of a controversial topic, because when they aren't giving grades now. Actually, my grandson is in the 7th grade now, and he just started getting grades. All the way through elementary school, he just either passed or didn't pass, and actually he of course passed everything. But the idea was that it really doesn't do students any good in the lower grades to be graded too seriously. Junior high, it starts becoming more important as it becomes both an intrinsic and an extrinsic motivation to get grades. And of course, in high school, it's very important. So they are weaning them off of the idea that you either passed or didn't pass, and now they're starting to get grades, and he likes it because he's doing very well. And of course, his mother, who is a teacher, is uh, real adamant that he does the best job he possibly can. Assessments give students needed feedback to guide their learning so that they can more efficiently reach curricular goals. This feedback process is challenging. Students do not always have a positive framework for interpreting test results. Teachers need to give careful thought to the delicate interaction between assessment and motivation. And now we're going to talk about motivation. The effect of assessment on students' motivation is complex. Grades, as one of the most common forms of assessment, have been shown to have both positive and negative effects on learning. On the Sorry, those are my dogs. My wife just got home, so they're having a hissy fit. On the negative side, grades may reduce a student's level of intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation comes from within the individual. Intrinsically motivated individuals gain enjoyment from participation in the activity itself without any outside reward. Extrinsic motivation refers to those motivators that come from the environment. Grades are typically viewed as an extrinsic motivator. They have the potential to divert attention away from intrinsic sources of motivation. Students who were once intrinsically motivated to learn may come to rely on the extrinsic rewards for motivation. Interestingly, extrinsically motivated individuals are less likely to enjoy a task. Grades are particularly challenging when students receive low grades. Since motivation is derived from the grade and the grade is low, students fail to receive sufficient reward to persist in the future. And this is part of the problem. I promised you the horse would still be here. There he is. He's right there. Okay. Anyway, so the idea is that if you are curious and you really want to know information, that is intrinsic. If you're just doing it for the grade, then that's extrinsic. And of course, the problem is if you get a poor grade and you're extrinsically motivated, then you lose your motivation. Or if you are really interested in something and somebody starts rewarding you for doing what you're doing, then the intrinsic motivation suddenly becomes intrinsic, or the intrinsic motivation suddenly becomes extrinsic, and you're less likely to want to do it. Intrinsic motivation, of course, is what drives us. Part of the reason grades can have a negative effect on learning is that often grades stress performance goals over mastery goals. And this is something that I am this is the reason I teach the way that I do. Performance goals mastery goals have to do with the idea that I want you to learn the information. Performance goals have to do with getting an A or doing well. I want you all to do well, but I also want you to accumulate the information. That's the most important thing as far as I'm concerned. Not whether you get an A or a B or a C. It's whether you accumulated the information that I want you to accumulate. When students set performance goals, their focus is on obtaining a satisfactory grade. Students with mastery goals are more focused on learning the material. So as far as mastering the information, you don't have to have a good grade to master the information. You just need you need passion and you need study. Performance. Some people, and I've seen this. It's really kind of interesting that there are individuals that do really, really well on tests, but they have no passion for the material. They don't really care about the material. They're just accumulating the information to get a good grade. And of course, that's performance. They have performance goals, but they have no mastery goals. Like an over-reliance on extrinsic motivators and emphasis on performance goals can undermine a student's intrinsic motivation. They focus attention on learning factual information rather than conceptual information. They limit problem solving and undermine creativity. A school-wide focus on mastery goals may limit decreases in intrinsic motivation. Using grades as an assessment tool does not always lead to negative outcomes. Often rewards such as participation points can make a boring task more interesting for students. Holding students accountable for learning through the grades increases the amount of time they spend studying and reviewing the material. Part of the issue with whether grades serve a positive or negative function in schools is in how the teacher uses them. Teachers should focus on making learning meaningful for the students, and that's the hardest thing for a teacher to be able to do because they're dealing with a whole classroom full of individuals. What motivates these individuals? How do you get them to want to learn? There's the horse again. Learning should not be about isolated facts, but embedded in an exciting and engaging context. Assessments need to accurately map onto the content. When this occurs, students working for a grade equate to working for meaningful learning because the teacher has made them the same thing. Students respond better to standards-based or criterion-based testing. Giving students a clear standard to reach produces better learning than broad tests that capture what percentage of the material was learned. And this is one of the reasons, if you've ever asked me to, you got a bad grade on a quiz and you want to take it again, I always say, sure, go ahead, that's fine. Why? Because that means you're going to cover the material one more time. And in reality, I keep, well, I don't really use my quizzes as to give you a grade. I use my quizzes as reviews. So if you have to take it twice, that's fine because you're going to be reviewing the material one more time. So, and like I said, I'm a little different. A final strategy to consider when using grades as motivators is reconceptualizing a failing grade. A failing grade indicates a student did not master the material. Their learning was incomplete. Failing grades can alternatively be presented to students as incompletes that must be corrected. This maintains the focus on mastering the material and gives the student the ability to do so. And of course, I will give incompletes. The idea is that you master the material, that you go back over the material. The more times you go back over the material, the more likely that you will retain the material. The rule is, it's a rule of three. For some people, it's only a rule of two. All they need to do is see the material more than once, and they retain it. But for other individuals, it's a rule of three. You need to see it three times in order to get the information get the information to stick in your brain. When I was in the military, one of the things they would do, they would tell you what they were going to tell you. They would tell you what they told you that they were going to tell you. And then at the end, they would review what they had just told you. So they would tell you three times. And luckily for me, I retained things fairly quickly. So I was able to get it the first or second time. I didn't really need that third time. So it got pretty redundant when they were giving me the information the third time. Another way assessment supports student learning is by providing corrective feedback. Learning is seldom perfect the first time information is presented. Students typically need time to process the information and experiment with its application. Periodic assessments give students needed corrective feedback to further the learning process. When learning objectives have simple, clear steps, feedback naturally follows and is straightforward. When learning objectives involve more complex concepts or advanced problem solving, it can be challenging to provide an assessment that is sensitive to the concept being taught. We're going to talk about feedback. Provide feedback as soon as possible after the initial learning. The sooner you give them feedback, the more likely it will be retained by them. Make feedback specific. You're talking about specific pieces of information. Concentrate on behaviors, not intent. In other words, you acted, you yelled in class. You yelled in class, I don't want you to do that anymore. We're concentrating on the behavior. We're not saying, hey, look, I know you're a bad kid and that's why you yelled in class. I don't want you to do that anymore. I just called you a bad kid. That has to do with intent. Keep feedback appropriate to the developmental stage of the learner. Okay, when I edited this. Oh, yeah, okay. the developmental stage of the learner. Uh, so if it's a little kid, you're going to treat them differently than if it's a junior high kid or if it's a high school kid. Emphasize praise and feedback on correct performance. You need to keep things as positive as possible. Demonstrate correct application of learning when giving negative feedback. How does this fit? This is what you did. This is what you should have done. Help students focus on process, not outcomes. This is and this was huge as far as my son was concerned because he was a math teacher and he was teaching individuals how to do things, how to perform mathematical formulas. And so the process was sometimes he would give partial credit for the process. So if they got the formula correct and they were using it correctly, but they didn't come up with the right answer, that was better than coming up with the right answer and not showing the process and how they came up with the right answer. Teach students how to provide feedback for themselves and how to judge their own performance. And of course, this is what we're trying to do is we're trying to make them problem solvers. We're trying to make them critical thinkers. Why did this not work? What should I do to make this work in the future? Students benefit most from feedback when it is presented soon after an assessment. We've said that twice. To provide such feedback, some teachers may choose to have brief meetings with each student following an assessment, knowing that providing written feedback takes them a long time. And this is part of the problem, of course, is time. And of course, do we have time to actually do this? Other teachers may elect to provide feedback to the entire class as a group, detailing frequently missed items. The only problem with talking to the entire group is that some people got it right, but you're just talking to the ones that got it wrong. And of course, everybody feels like they're being chastised or being told why they did things wrong, and that kind of backfires on you. Although this technique provides quick feedback, it often fails to provide students with enough specific feedback to fully meet their learning needs. Another approach to providing feedback is to make use of technology. Chat rooms, discussion boards, email, and other communication tools give teachers multiple options for providing responsive feedback. There's a section at the end of the text that talks about technology. I didn't put very much of that in there, and the reason I didn't is because this is changing so drastically, so rapidly that what I tell you today and what Swartwood wrote in this textbook, by the time you guys, if you ever start teaching, by the time you get there, everything's going to be different. Zoom didn't exist until COVID. Actually, there was Skype and Duo, but it wasn't what it is today. I mean, Zoom is taking over the world. So things change. I mean, they change very rapidly. So talking about chat rooms and discussion boards and emails and other communication tools, that talking about these right now, uh, who knows what it's going to be in the future? Who knows what kind of tweeting and twittering and zooming that people will be doing in the future. Informal assessments are unplanned opportunities to gather information about student learning. Teachers use these assessments every day in a variety of situations. The opportunities for gathering information informally are endless. Effective teachers take advantage of these opportunities to learn more about their students and to provide specific and effective instruction. Informal assessments have the advantage of being directly tied to the content being taught since they are derived from a student's immediate involvement in the curriculum. They are highly adaptive. Teachers can easily explore concerns with further observation or additional questioning. When using informal assessments, because they are unplanned and spontaneous, they lack the methodological rigor used to develop more formal forms of testing, such as standardized tests. Their inherent flexibility makes it difficult to develop any standard operating procedures. This means that different teachers may explore a learning challenge in entirely different ways and come up with very different conclusions. And of course, if you've taken classes from Dr. Russ, Dr. Barber, and from me, you know that we all teach differently, completely differently. If Dr. Russ, who actually has her doctorate is in educational psychology, she would be teaching this class completely differently than I do. Who knows what she would be doing? I have no idea. But we all do things differently. And the reason we do things differently is because we have different ideas of how to get this information um, into your long-term memory. Dr. Barber would do it differently. Dr. Begay, who's no longer teaching at Dene College, Dr. Marilyn Begay probably taught this very, very much differently than I am. I think she used a canned text, if I'm not mistaken. She used a textbook from, I don't know, from McGraw-Hill or someplace, and she didn't tell me. I asked her and she wouldn't tell me what she was using. And that's okay because I came up with Swartwood. And this text was cheap. Well, actually, you guys got it for free, but in the future, if I'm teaching this class, then it will be a very inexpensive text that costs less than $50. Informal assessments also result in information that is unique to the learning situation. One of the reasons you guys got it so cheap is because it hasn't actually been proofed yet. And that's one of the reasons I've been having such a difficult time getting the PowerPoints put together, and that's why I'm a little bit behind. There's a couple different reasons why I'm behind, but one of the reasons is because it hasn't been proofed yet, and they have just come out with the PowerPoints. I didn't like them. Um, with every textbook, you get canned PowerPoints. I usually make up my own, but I use theirs as a scaffold to build my PowerPoints on. But I didn't like theirs at all. So anyway, that's and they didn't come out with them until probably chapter 8 or 9, I guess, maybe even later. But so this is a brand new text, like I said before. It's doesn't come out till next year, so you guys got a break. I hope you haven't noticed too many mistakes. Most of the mistakes are my typographical errors, like developmental in that one slide. Informal assessments also result in information that is unique to the learning situation. And at the end of this, I'll explain to you why it's been so difficult for me to get through this process this semester. It is difficult to take an informal assessment conducted in one class and suggest its application in another class. It is likely to be specific to the learning context in which it was observed. Taking these cautions into consideration, teachers should endeavor to stay alert and focused during the school day, looking for valuable informal opportunities to observe how students learn and grow. And of course, we're doing that constantly. It's not stalking. I'm not being a creeper. What I'm doing is trying to figure out if you guys are really getting the information the way that I present it. Formal assessments are planned and constructed in advance to assess a particular learning objective. And of course, this is what how the canned texts work. So you would think it would be better if we all use canned text all the time. But I never do. I never used a canned text. I always make up my own PowerPoints. And the reason is because 25 years ago, when I started teaching at Fort Belknap, PowerPoints were brand new, and their memory was tiny. Memory was floppy disks, and then they became hard disks. Jump drives. They didn't invent jump drives until like 15 years ago. So no pictures. You had to create your own PowerPoints. The textbooks weren't creating PowerPoints for textbooks. So you had to come up with your own. And I always found that I liked my PowerPoints better than the ones provided by the textbook because the textbook was written, or the PowerPoints were created by sometimes people that weren't even educational psychology or whatever the subject is. They weren't even experts in the field. They were just people that looked at the material and said, "Well, I guess this is the important stuff." Or sometimes they were given a breakdown by the author, and they would say, "Well, this is the important stuff, so that's what you need to put in," but that they wouldn't put it in very well. It's not being created by the author. Anyway, I think mine are more comprehensive, and they're in narrative form. So I find it much easier for me to create my own PowerPoints, even though it takes a lot longer. It would be a lot easier if I just, accepted what the textbook said. But I know what I want to teach you, and I know what I think is important. So there you go. Not only that, but the textbook companies are aiming at the generic student. Is the generic student a Dene from Saley or from Lukachukai or from Dalcon or whatever? Um, and the answer is no. No, certainly not. They're people from, they're uh, immigrants from Haiti and living in Florida, and they're white people living in the Cascade Mountains up in upper New York State. Those are the people that they're aiming for, not for you guys. So it's much better if I create my own PowerPoints. They may be used frequently as learning progresses or used at the end of a learning task. The formal assessments, I'm not real crazy about those. I don't give finals. I just give quizzes. I don't give summative tests. Uh, uh, so there you go. What formal assessments have in common is that they are developed in advance and are used to measure specific aspects of learning, no matter how you learned it. I learned not to use formal assessments when I was in college. I took a class, New Testament. I took a class on the New Testament, and we struggled through the Bible, the New Testament all year, and we're busting our tails, and the normal professor wasn't there. It was all these adjuncts. They had three adjuncts that were taking the place of one guy, and so right at the end of the semester, about a month before the semester ended, he came back, and they let the adjuncts go, and he taught the last month, and so we're in classroom with. I mean, before we were all separated into our own little groups, and the adjuncts, of course, they were teaching. Each was teaching a different thing. Uh, Same area. They were all covering the same thing, but they were doing it in different ways. So he comes back, and of course, he doesn't teach us hardly at all. And then he gives us his own final. He gave us his own final. I flunked it. I flunked it because, he knew what he wanted us to learn, so that's what he tested us over. The guy that I was learning from didn't cover most of the stuff that was on the test. The fraternity guys passed the test because they had his a copy of his old tests, and they were able to pass. But independents didn't make it because we didn't have copies of the test. Anyway, so that's why I try not to do that. I think it's incorrect. Teachers have a long history of using formal assessment tools. They have the advantage of being familiar to students and relatively easy to construct. One of the most common forms is the formal written test. Written tests make use of a variety of question formats. Written test items are sometimes divided into two broad categories. Selected response questions are those that have students select a correct answer from a limited set of options. Multiple choice, true and false, and matching are selected response questions. These questions are considered objective questions because grading each question does not rely on interpretation by the teacher. It's always A, B, C, D, or E in this case. Each question, I'm looking to the right here, each question is simply compared to an answer key developed in advance by the teacher. Grading is uniform across students. These questions are typically used to assess basic factual knowledge, but they can be adapted to assess more complex reasoning tasks. Teachers need to pay close attention to how they construct these items so that they test both factual knowledge and complex real-life learning. Keep in mind these questions do not measure writing ability and are difficult to adapt to measure organization and presentation skills. There's the horse again. Constructed responses are those that require students to create their own answers, rather than picking a correct answer from choices provided by the teacher. Essay questions and those requiring a short answer are examples of constructed response questions. These questions are considered subjective questions because grading the correctness of a given response requires the judgment of the teacher. Teachers often use a grading rubric for these questions. A rubric, and if you have looked in the syllabus, you've seen my rubrics for the paper and for discussions. Yes, I have rubrics for those. A rubric includes basic criteria for grading an item, but teacher perception still potentially shapes scoring. Rubrics are extremely useful as formative assessment tools, providing teachers with ongoing information about the learning process, which encourages sensitive student feedback. In general, constructed response questions provide a different window on learning. The nature of the response format allows teachers to assess different comprehension standards, such as how well a student analyzes content and synthesizes information. And they have been doing studies on these for the longest time, trying to figure out, well, which is better, the objective test or the objective questions or the subjective questions. And what they've determined is that objective questions, multiple choice, true and false, matching questions, are more comprehensive than subjective questions. Why? Well, there's four possibilities here. They throw four different pieces of information at you, and you've got to select the one that is correct with this one. So you have to think. You have to think about, well, the question is asking this, and this is a possible answer. With a subjective question, you don't have any answers. You're not looking at anything. You don't have to eliminate this or eliminate that, or this isn't quite right. So you're just trying to find one piece of information. With an objective question, you have to wade through four different options. Now, in real life, yeah, maybe you can come up with the right answer right away, but in real life, a lot of times you have choices, and you have to come up with the right choices. And for that reason, they think that objective questions are better than subjective questions. They've been testing this for the longest time. Unfortunately, objective questions, especially multiple choice, have been really denigrated in the past. But new research is showing that objective questions are more difficult. and they teach people better, or they actually test you better, because you have to sift through other pieces of information. With subjective questions, you're only sifting through, you're trying to find the answer in your mind. You're only thinking of one thing. With objective questions, with multiple choice questions, you've got to sift through wrong answers to come up with the right answer. Anyway, and you can, the old idea is that subjective questions are much better. That it's only been about 4 or 5 years since they came out with the idea, with the understanding that objective questions are better. There you go. But you know, the people that went through their PhD program 10 years ago still think subjective questions are better. Rubrics are extremely useful as formative assessment tools, providing teachers with ongoing information about the learning process, which encourages sensitive student feedback. In general, constructed response questions provide a different window on learning. The nature of the response format allows teachers to assess different comprehension standards, such as how well a student analyzes content and synthesizes information. If you ask probably all the faculty at Dene College whether they think that subjective questions are better than objective questions, about 90% are going to say, oh, subjective questions, of course. That's because it was a long time ago that they went to school. And we've been going through this assessment process a lot over the last 30 years. And for the longest time, anyway, they were first, they made us test everybody, and then they made us test everybody with subjective questions, because they said that objective questions were too easy. Then they got then everything changed. I mean, assessment has changed over the last 30 years when I first started, and about every 5 years they come up with new ideas. Now we're into writing, I think. Anyway, that's how we judge. We judge whether you guys learned anything by looking at your papers. So papers are important. In general, constructed response questions provide a different window on learning. We already talked about that. Teachers also make frequent use of book reports, homework, and presentations. These assessments provide the teacher with additional information about student learning. Given that they are typically completed outside of the classroom, the dynamics involved in executing the assessment are different from most written tests. Without the structure provided by the teacher, some students struggle to complete these assignments. Some students thrive under these conditions and demonstrate learning that in-class assignments fail to capture. Teachers need to recognize these potential differences and develop an assessment approach that is meaningful and appropriate for each student. One of the problems we're having right now is AI and ChatGPT. People are asking ChatGPT, all right, write me a book report about To Kill a Mockingbird. And it will. It'll give you a two, 3, 4, 5 page report on To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, half of it's going to be pretty silly and not very accurate, but it'll still give you what you want. And that's a problem. So are we actually, in the future, and this is something you guys are going to have to worry about. I'm too old to have to worry about it. If this really becomes an issue, I'll probably just retire. From my earlier video that I'm 75 years old, so I can retire at any time. There is a reason why I'm still at Dene College. Okay, here's an interesting question. Which of the following American Indian tribes are indigenous to the Great Lakes region? Now, you know that it's not the Navajo, and you know it's not the Pueblo. So the question is it the Cherokee or the Iroquois? Well, if you don't know where the Cherokee came from or you don't know where the Iroquois come from, then you may not get this right. But the answer is Iroquois. The Cherokee were in the southeast. Navajo and Pueblo, of course, in the southwest. The Iroquois were in the northeast. There you go. I had to think about this the first time I saw it. I knew that Navajo and Pueblo wasn't correct. One of the most common formats for a written test is a form of select response question known as multiple choice. And this is the STEM and the distractors, okay. They can be adapted to measure a wide range of learning objectives across many subject areas. Given this flexibility, they are not only used in classrooms, but also on most standardized achievement tests. They're not easy to construct. And I have to construct one every week. And I haven't constructed this week's quiz yet, but maybe I'll use this question. Often multiple choice items are poorly constructed, leading to ineffective knowledge assessment. The multiple choice item has two main parts. The STEM is the question, it's the initial part of the question, and then the distractors are the answer alternatives that follow. And this is the reason that they have determined that objective tests teach you more, or they force you to think more. In other words, if you look at this, and there were no answers here, of course, for one thing, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't have a choice of an answer. But even if as you look at this question, you can think to yourself, well, I know where the Navajo are. They're in the southwest. I know where the Pueblo are. They're in the southwest. So now it's between the Iroquois and the Cherokee. Where were the Cherokee? Well, they're in Oklahoma right now. Where did they start out? That's the question you'd have to ask yourself. Where in the world did the Cherokee start out? And the answer, of course, is the southeast. That leaves the Great Lakes region and the Iroquois. And that's true. The Iroquois are over there. Actually, they were displaced by the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the what's the other word for Anishinaabe? I can't think of it. Anyway, there's three names for that group. They were huge, and they displaced a lot of different other tribes. It was one of the problems they had. This was before European incursion. That group became just huge, and it moved a lot of different tribes over, including the Siouan-speaking tribes, the Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota. Anyway, not important. And that's the reason that objective tests are a little bit more difficult. And the reason is because you're looking at distractors. Whereas if I had to come up with it myself, I've got no distractors. Just have to come up with the name of a tribe. And I don't have to think Navajo. I don't have to think Cherokee. I don't have to think Pueblo. I can just say Iroquois. Authoring written tests is often challenging for the beginning teacher, and multiple choice items are particularly challenging. Tests should be reviewed with the students after administration to obtain information on student perception of the test items. The goal is ultimately to develop a test that accurately reflects student learning. It is unlikely that this will be optimal the very first time a test is written, and that's my tests are always optimal. Just kidding. Sometimes I have problems as well. Tests require constant updating and modification to become a realistic reflection of learning. What is the answer? This is right. Not this one. Definitely this. I give up. Okay, there you go. There we go. We get the horse back again. Forced choice or true false items are another form of selected response questions used to assess the student ability to recognize correct definitions and factual information. Each question consists of a single statement that the student must endorse as correct or incorrect. As with multiple choice items, the questions can be used across a wide range of subjects. They are not particularly good tools for assessing complexity. Often, beginning teachers believe that forced choice questions are easy to create and rush to use them, and they sure as the world are much easier to create than one of these. And the reason is because you can come up with a question and you know what the right answer is. Now you have to come up with the wrong answers. And that's not always easy. And sometimes I will really struggle with coming up with wrong answers. And sometimes it's, you get two really good wrong answers, and then that third one, or that third wrong answer, you just can't find it. It's got to be here somewhere. Anyway. When choosing information to test, select content that is specific, not broad. Questions regarding broad information are typically vague and open to multiple interpretations. And of course, that's the biggest problem. You need to create a question that doesn't have multiple interpretations. That's the hard, that even with multiple choice questions, if it's got multiple interpretations, then you've made a mistake. Avoid taking information directly from the textbook. Rephrase content in your own words, keep statements simple, and only present one idea. That's the hard part too. Teachers often place multiple ideas in a statement, each of which needs to be judged true or false. And that's true or false questions. Essay questions are excellent examples of constructed answer questions, as are short answer and completion questions. Essay questions are one of the most flexible and effective assessment tools to measure complex learning. The way I measure complex learning is through your discussions, not through the quizzes. The flexibility comes from the freedom the format affords the student. Students are potentially free to respond to any essay in any manner that they can create. Students can demonstrate analysis, synthesis, relation, integration, and evaluation, among others. The primary limiter is the way the teacher asks the questions. Questions can be generated from any field of study. They also have the advantage of assessing writing ability, although this may need to be graded separately from the content-related information. The potential of the essay to assess complex learning is entirely dependent on the teacher's ability to structure appropriate questions. Teachers should first consider if other response formats are more appropriate. Factual information may be better assessed using the selected response items. When an essay is used, the student's task should be clearly indicated in the question. Simple, brief questions may be easier to write, but they do not help the student recognize the required information. The task should be described fully so the student can address the topic and the teacher can grade the answer with precision. Though students may favor choice, it means that students are taking different tests. It makes cross-student comparisons difficult. And of course, yeah, I give you choices. I give you choices, but I never compare students. In the fields of education and psychology, we are seeing dramatic shifts in the perception of the learning process. We are beginning to pay closer attention to how students actively, and one of the things I need to tell you, and now that we're at the end of this, now that we're at the end of the semester, I can tell you, I don't grade your discussions by whether you're right or wrong. There is no such thing as right or wrong. Usually the questions don't have right or wrong answers. They just have answers. So what I grade is the quality of what you're writing. I'm looking for volume, to tell you the truth. I'm looking for ideas. I want you to show me that this has made you think. And the best questions are the ones that make you think a lot, and that's what I'm hoping for. I want you to think critically, just like this guy. Look at all that. We're beginning to pay closer attention to how students actively construct knowledge and how this interacts with the instructional practice. Educational professions are increasingly emphasizing that teaching, learning, and assessment are inseparable. Changes in one necessarily leads to changes in the others. Based on this broader perspective on learning, assessment practices are shifting to capture learning more comprehensively. And one of the things that we may be seeing in the future, you guys are going to have to deal with this. One of the things we're seeing in the future is everybody may be using ChatGPT. That's possible. Everybody may be using AI, and so I don't know. I don't know what that's going to do to education. If you can just ask your phone questions and get the right answer or get an answer, the problem is going to be that people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, whoever owns Google, these are the individuals that are going to own the answers because they own the companies. And the companies are going to decide what the right answer is. So we're going to have to be dealing with truth and falsities. This may get interesting, and we need to keep our eyes open. You know, you and I are smart. You and I are smart. We know what the answers are and what the answers should be. But in the future, our kids may not know that because they may believe whatever they see on the internet. And if I mean, there's a lot of junk, there's a lot of lies on the internet. Well, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I think that my knowledge base is so broad that I think that I can stay on top of this, but I don't know about my grandson. I worry about my grandson. I don't worry about you guys because I'm teaching you to think critically. And you're showing me that you can. Oops. Assessment approaches evolving out of changes. Assessment approaches evolving out of changing perceptions of learning are called alternative assessments. Alternative assessments. I'm thinking of truth and falsities right now. Alternative assessments are any assessment beyond traditional assessment, for example, multiple choice tests, homework, and reports. These assessments provide newer and more productive ways to capture learning. They also support student motivation to take responsibility for their own learning. Alternative assessments help foster creative thinking and the application of knowledge rather than simple memorization. And that's what I'm trying to keep you guys from doing. That's why I don't give quizzes and I don't give summative tests. I don't want you to need to memorize things. I want you to understand concepts. I want you to be able to think for yourselves. Because when you're out in the field in psychology, reading people and counseling potentially, one of the things you're going to have to do, you know, you could memorize the entire textbook. It's not going to help you analyze. You're going to need to use critical thinking in order to figure out what the situation is. Memorization is not going to help you. Sorry. You just need to figure out what's wrong with this guy and how can I help him. Concepts. Okay, these are forms of alternative assessments: performance assessment, portfolios, cooperative learning groups, peer teaching, exit cards, journals, exhibitions, demonstrations, simulations, observations. We're going to go through some of these. This is what an exit card looks like. So I should give you guys an exit card to see how you liked my lesson. You can show me a smiley face, a sleepy face, an angry face, a worried face, an excited face, a happy face, a sad face, or a neutral face. Exit cards. Alternative assessments are often embedded performance-based activities. Performance-based activities are learning situations that apply knowledge in ways mirroring application in real life. The reasoning behind performance-based activities is that meaningful learning should be based on useful information. This seems a reasonable expectation, but is often difficult to realize. Teachers should think about the utility of a learning objective and make consistent ongoing efforts to help students experience learning applied to life. And this looks like that girl on Family Matters? No, what's that? What is that show? I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, it just went off the air. The older daughter, the goofy older daughter. Well, anyway. Performance-based assessment encompasses many learning activities, including science experiments, plays, oral presentations, debates, conversing in a foreign language, and applied mathematics. The only practical limit to the range of performance-based assessments is the imagination of the teacher. One of the primary assessment benefits to the teacher is a more detailed account of the process of learning in addition to the end product of learning, and that should be separated. That's not amore, means I love, or love in Italian. Anyway, traditional forms, that's why I laughed. That's should be a more detailed. Traditional forms of assessment, written tests, focus on what a student ultimately learned at the end of an instructional period. While this is certainly important, assessing the learning process provides a more comprehensive assessment, including information on the learning process. When assessing provides an opportunity to examine idea formation, organization, execution, originality, and even self-evaluation. These are highly complex cognitive tasks which take learning assessment beyond simple factual learning. And that's exactly what we're trying to get you to do. Because, in school, having the right answer is really, really important. In real life, it's your ability to use critical thinking and problem solve that are going to get you through life. All of these things are going to get you through life. Knowing whether what that lady's name is, I can't think of it, is not that important. It's the critical thinking. When constructing a performance-based assessment, teachers should be mindful of how students will be graded, and this is the hardest part. That's why we need rubrics. Often one of the limitations of these assessments is that it is difficult to create reliable grading criteria, and you have to use the same grading criteria for each student. Otherwise, it's not fair. I'm going to give this student an A because they're nice to me. I'm going to give this student a bad grade because they pick on me in class. No, that's not the way it works. Can't do that. Implementing a performance-based assessment and grading the assessment should always be considered at the same time. Teachers need to make sure that they clarify their instructional objectives and how they intend to grade a performance-based assessment. And this just happened to me last week, as a matter of fact. I'll tell you about it at the end of the semester, or at the end of this video. A commonly used alternative assessment. No, I'll tell you now. Okay, last week I was given the opportunity to review Fulbright scholarship applications. It's an honor. It really is an honor. I don't know how in the world they got my name, but last week I was able to do that. And so they gave us the criteria. And there were 3 people we had 55 applications that we had to go through, performance-based assignments. They were talking about research they wanted to do, and the country that I was sending people to was Germany. Well, I was stationed in Germany for 3 years. I know some German. It's not important. It's not important because they didn't write their applications in German. These are all American students, of course. And we were going to give them a scholarship for free education for a whole year in Germany. And for that to happen, they needed to communicate with the German, they needed to talk about their research with a German university, and then the university needed to accept them. Okay, so we had 300 applications, and we graded 55 of them. So there were 6 different groups that were grading Fulbright scholarship applications. Okay, my knowledge base is fairly broad, and that's what I was talking about before. I have degrees in I have 5 degrees in 4 different disciplines: psychology, international relations, which is political science, medical laboratory technology, which is medicine, and English. My bachelor's degree is in English. So as I was reading these, and of course that they fit all of those, plus philosophy and environmental science and computer science, were all part of this. But I understood everything that I was reading. The 2 individuals that I was braiding with, who were on the committee with me in my group, had very specific knowledge bases. One was a literature, was her area of expertise in children's literature specifically, and the other was a political science and religion was his area. Okay, and he didn't know a whole lot about other things. So as we read these, and we did them all individually, and then we came together and we compared our scores. And it was really kind of interesting because I gave the highest scores. Almost always I gave the highest score. And the political science and religion guy gave everybody the lowest score, as curious as that is. Then the lady who was the children's literature was somewhere in the middle. It was really weird because every single one that we looked at, all 55 of them, that's the way it was. It was always the same. But when we started talking about them, one of the things I discovered was I understood what they wanted to research, and the other two, not so much. So they were looking at grade point. They were looking at other criteria, and I just ignored the other criteria. I was just looking at the research to um, see if it made any sense and if it was a good research project. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because last week, one of the reasons that I didn't finish this lecture was because last week I was working on the Fulbright scholarship, and like I said, it's quite an honor. Uh, Getting a Fulbright, there's only a couple hundred Fulbright scholarships given out every year. So this was quite an honor to be one of the reviewers, and I thought I did a pretty good job. But we'll see. I may get fired and not get to come back next semester or next year, or next year I won't be doing it again. But who knows? Who knows? Anyway, that's one of the reasons I'm so far behind. I had to review 55 applications, and they were like 15 pages long, each one of them. So. Anyway, that's my excuse. It's the only one I could come up with, and I had a good time. I really enjoyed it because I understood everything that I was reading. That's kind of fun. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because that's the reason I haven't graded. I haven't been grading as stringently as I probably should be because I'm a little bit behind, and it's because I had to do that last week. So there you go. Okay, what are we doing? We're creating rubrics and trying to grade everybody the same. And that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to grade everybody the same. And when I looked at things, I looked at it a little bit more positively than the guy that was the political science religion guy. He was from Texas. And then the lady that was kind of in the middle, she graded everybody that came from a prestigious school. She graded them high. I didn't even look at where they came from to begin with. I just graded their research, and if they came from Yale or Harvard, way to go. But most of them didn't. As a matter of fact, one of the things I noticed was that people from Ivy League schools were not doing very good jobs coming up with innovative research. The innovative research was coming out of technical schools like Purdue. Purdue's a agricultural school. Um, where else? Western Kentucky. It's really kind of interesting. I was really um, curious as to where these people were coming from. Are our best and brightest actually coming out of the Ivy League schools? And one of the things I discovered, about a third of them were from Ivy League schools. Not the best research projects were coming out of those. So I'm just wondering how practical uh, those schools are as to teaching people how to think and how to analyze. Anyway, so I've made my mea culpas, so I will get on. Teachers need to make sure that they clarify their instructional objectives and how they intend to grade a performance-based assessment. And of course, that's what I was doing with those applications. I was actually grading them by using the criteria that Fulbright had given us, ignoring some of the criteria that I didn't agree with. I didn't think grade point average was that important. If it was a good research project, that's what I was looking for. A commonly used alternative assessment is the portfolio. A portfolio is a purposeful collection of student work in a particular context. Portfolios have been used in many of the arts and performing arts. Sculptors, painters, and actors routinely collect samples of their work and accomplishments. In education, the portfolio is an assessment tool that is only recently becoming popular. Portfolios in education are typically used for one of two purposes: student assessment and instruction. And when we first started the BA psychology program, I was here the first year, and the individual that had put the program together wanted to accumulate portfolios on all the students. And I didn't think it was a very good idea because, well, I didn't think that might have been a really good idea at Northwestern, where she taught, where she went to school, but I didn't think it was going to work on the Navajo Nation. I didn't think portfolios were a very good idea. Anyway, we never actually used them. Portfolios typically serve a primary function that is either to assess the student or to provide a unique avenue for instruction. Portfolios provide an opportunity for students to demonstrate what they have learned in a way that traditional tests have failed to capture. They can demonstrate student growth by showing growth over time. They can help teach students to be more reflective about their work. Teachers and students often work together collaboratively to create and learn from portfolios. Parents also benefit from them since portfolios provide a concrete document to discuss during conferences with teachers. There are potential limitations to assigning portfolios. Portfolios are not particularly useful if they do not address a specific purpose. And this was my complaint of using portfolios. She had specific ideas about what should be in the portfolio, and I was telling her, uh, "You've got not all these students are going to be the same. They're not going to be little mini me's, mini yous actually." Um, and I didn't think it would work, and I was right. A random collection of student work does not constitute a portfolio, and that's really what she was trying to do. Portfolios are assessment tools and need to have a clear and direct tie to the specific learning objective. And we're talking about lots of different classes that cover a lot of different topics. So I didn't think it would work, and of course I was right. Of course I was right. There need to be a clear guideline for what is included in a portfolio. Teachers need to decide what elements of a portfolio the teacher determines and what element the student chooses. It is important that the purpose of the portfolio is clearly defined before it is started. Equally important is the scoring criteria for the portfolio. Historically, portfolios have been difficult to grade, and as you can imagine, and she wanted to grade them all. She didn't want me to be part of it. and I didn't want to be part of it because I didn't think they would work. The grading criteria drive the portfolio construction process. Clear grading criteria equates to clearer, more consistent portfolios. And initially, she wanted to emphasize research. So there was no counseling. There was one counseling class, and that was it. She was trying to guide people into research, into psychological research. And I thought, well, that's not what is needed here. What we need are counselors. What we need are people that can help other individuals. And, research is important in itself, but research isn't going to, doesn't especially help people on the reservation. Exhibitions are opportunities for students to display their learning to the public. The public may consist of peers, teachers, or community members. Exhibitions help with the assessment of a student's knowledge and their ability to think and problem solve in a real-time exercise. Students need to be able to respond to questions appropriately. They also need to be able to communicate in a dynamic environment. This provides a much more comprehensive assessment than a traditional written test. There's our horse. Exhibitions share many of the features of other non-traditional student-centered assessments. Exhibitions involve going beyond traditional learning to integrate learning into real life. They are public expressions of learning and involve sharing knowledge. Exhibitions require the active participation of the learner. Students must learn how to become an advocate for their learning product. They also need to express their knowledge in such a way that it synthesizes new content and research with their ability to effectively plan. Exhibitions provide a variety of assessment products, oral presentation ability, research experience, question responsiveness, and learning products. Exhibitions are more of a summative assessment of a student's learning. They can also be designed to assess a student's critical reflection skills in a formative manner. A final advantage of exhibitions is that assessment is typically by consensus, bringing together the opinions of teacher, peers, administrators, and members of the community. Initially, right now we have 497, 498, and 499. 497 is thesis. 498 is research, student research, and 499 is internship, fieldwork. Initially, we only had 498. There was no 497 and 499. But because everybody couldn't do the research that she wanted them to do, she allowed them. Well, anyway, we added the other two, and the option that is taken by most of our graduating BA students is 497 actually, and I teach that. So, wow, I was right again. Grades serve an instructional purpose. They aid the teacher with instructional process. Grades should improve the quality of instruction and learning. Grading is most effective when it is closely aligned with instructional objectives. To create this connection, teachers need to avoid creating assessments and grading criteria before they have clear instructional goals. When teachers take the time to decide what it is they want their students to learn and to clearly articulate these objectives, then assessment and grades follow more naturally. Grades should not only document the student's performance level, but should provide information on the student's strengths and weaknesses. This information is crucial if the teachers are going to help guide a student to more effective learning in the future. Helping students appreciate how to place greater reliance on their strengths while accommodating their weaknesses creates a more hopeful and motivated student. Grading does not impact all students equally, particularly for those students receiving the lowest grades. The effects of failure on student achievement are complex. Some students view failure as a challenge and study harder. Other students view failure as confirmation that no matter what they do, success is not possible. Students who use failure as a source of motivation to succeed may have a higher degree of commitment to the learning task. A quality that has been associated with a positive response to failure is self-efficacy. Self-efficacy refers to an individual's belief in their own abilities. Students with a well-developed sense of self-efficacy can maintain a strong sense of control over learning. After a failure, they are more likely to persist and expend additional effort to learn the material. This quality is different from those students who struggle after they experience failure. These students explain the error in such a way that it encourages less effort and engagement in the task. Based on attribution theory, these students appeared to attribute the cause of their failure to uncontrollable causes that are reasonably stable. Such attributions further their negative feelings and perpetuate failure in the future. This undermines their sense of control and their belief that effort produces positive outcomes. Grades serve a communication function in schools. Teachers use grades to help communicate to parents how their child is progressing in school. Grades should accurately and effectively communicate learning objectives, learning progress, and the student's unique strengths and weaknesses. They should be presented with portfolios or other examples of student work. Presented grades, parents, and valuable part of the learning equation, understand what their child is supposed to be learning as well as how much they have learned. Examples help make this process clearer, giving parents and the teacher a common framework to discuss the student's progress. How are grades used by the school system? Schools use grades for a variety of internal purposes. Used in conjunction with standardized tests, they're used for accountability purposes. Grades are also used to promote students to the next grade and for graduation. They are used to determine honors, awards, and eligibility for participation in athletics and other extracurricular activities. All are important functions and underscore the need for appropriate assignment of grades. Letter grades are one of the most common approaches to grading. They are convenient for teachers and are widely accepted and understood. They are a measure of achievement and personal qualities such as persistence, effort, motivation, and work ethic. This makes it difficult to use the information in a constructive way to help the student improve. The single grade does not clarify strengths and weaknesses. Single grades simply embody too many factors to be the sole source of feedback for a student. This makes using the grade more challenging and highlights the importance of supporting letter grades with additional information. The perception of letter grades differs across schools. This potentially leads to dramatic differences in the range of letter grades used by a given school. Some schools give predominantly A's and B's. Other schools may use the full range of available grades. We were talking about we had, we had one of the applications was from an individual that had gone to Citadel, and Citadel, I don't know if you've Citadel's in South Carolina. It's a military college in South Carolina. Citadel gives notoriously bad grades. They very rarely give A's. They very rarely give B's even. The one of the evaluators was looking at this guy's transcript, and she was saying, "Geez, he's a B and C student." And I tried to explain to her, "Well, yeah, but he goes to the Citadel, and they almost never give A's. And he got a bunch of A's, but not as many as she wanted to see. So she graded him lower." He had good research that he wanted to do though. And and some schools, they Ivy League schools very rarely give grades below C, and the reason is because if you just go to class and you show up and you stay in class, they call it the gentleman's C. They will give you a C if you just show up to class. So you can not do anything potential. This is the old days. I'm not sure what they're doing now. I imagine they don't do that anymore. But in the old days, if you were had the money to go to Harvard, you passed. All you needed to do was to be admitted and go to class from time to time, make the professor aware of who you were, and you would get a gentleman's C. And of course, that's the problem. Some are very competitive. Some schools are very competitive. Other schools are not competitive. Other schools just give away grades. Letter grades should be approached with caution because they potentially encourage undue competition between students, and you really don't want students competing with one another. And you don't want the professors to compete to force the students to compete with one another. One of the problems that we have is that about I don't know about 20 years ago they were saying, well, you have to give a select percentage of your students get A's, a select percentage gets B's, a select percent gets C's, and then you have to not pass a select percentage of your class, no matter what grades people got. Well, I didn't like that at all because you're college students. You're working hard. Why in the world would I give you a bad grade if you earned a higher grade? It just didn't make any sense to me. Anyway, that was something that they were doing 20 or 30 years ago, and I rebelled against it. I'm not the reason it changed. There were a lot of people that didn't like it. It didn't make a whole lot of sense, but I can't remember. It was Oxford that was doing it, or Cambridge. Somebody was doing it. For others, the resulting anxiety has a negative impact on their achievement. Some students thrive under these conditions, like her, and some students don't, like him. Teachers may go out of their way to ensure grades are confidential, but they should be realistic and understand that students talk amongst themselves. Grades usually become public knowledge very quickly. I don't see this happening. Teachers need to make sure that they are sensitive to the impact of grades on future performance. Pass-fail grades are a type of standard criterion grading system. This means that prior to instruction, teachers establish a set of learning standards. The goal is for students to meet or exceed these predetermined skill levels. If the student achieves at this level or above, the pass grade is given. If a student does not meet the standard, a fail grade is given. This type of system works well for learning objectives that have clear acceptable performance levels. One of the potential problems with this system is that it is insensitive to the varying needs of the student. Um, One of the students had a lot of pass-fail grades. They were taking classes pass-fail, and the evaluator that was so big into the GPA thing didn't like that. She didn't like that at all because she couldn't gauge as to whether they learned anything or not. She said. Anyway, like I said, I didn't care about their GPA. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. Checklist grading systems are used with increasing frequency in schools, particularly in elementary schools. And this is what happened with my grandson. Didn't really get a grade. He got something on the checklist, usually superior, excellent, or meets criteria or whatever. Often viewed as playing a supportive role to letter grades, these grades provide a system for teachers to document the extent to which students have mastered various learning standards. Checklists can be developed for academic subjects as well as behavioral standards. Artifacts. This is something that we have to collect from you guys. This proves that you have done something. We have to collect your artifacts. And in the case of the psychology department, most of our artifacts are your papers, those 5-page papers that I think Dr. Barber uses reflection papers or something. Anyway, I just use those papers. To show examples of a student's work, artifacts are collected. Artifact is a general term referring to samples of student work or learning. Each artifact must serve a specific purpose in documenting learning according to the learning standards for the task. Without this direct connection to the learning objective, the project is useless. One of the most popular software, and this is I'm right at the end. This is the last slide. It talked more about technology, but I'm not going to talk about it. All I'm going to talk about is electronic grade books. We have this in Canvas. We had it in Blackboard. It's in every learning platform. Um, this is how we accumulate your grades. It's a lot easier than writing it down and then having to add everything up. One of the most popular software applications used by teachers is the electronic gradebook. Electronic gradebooks are software programs designed to record grades, calculate relevant summary statistics, such as averages, and convert numeric grades into letter grades based on a user-defined system. They can dramatically increase the efficiency and speed of grade management tasks. They certainly do. They can also be used in combination with an internet-based course management system to give students rapid and detailed feedback regarding their own performance, as well as that of the class as a whole. Such systems can be set to provide feedback immediately after an assignment is completed. And that is the end of the chapter. I need to tell you, I appreciate your patience. It's been a long, hard semester, mainly because there was no supplemental material for this textbook. Hadn't been written yet when I adopted it. Hadn't been written yet 2/3 of the way through the semester, and then of course they threw it out, or they allowed me to look at it. I didn't like it, so I had to do all this stuff by myself, and that's fine. Like I said, I'd rather do it myself anyway. The other thing was the Fulbright. I had accepted the Fulbright assignment back in September, not knowing that, thinking, of course, that by this time they would have come up with more supplemental material. Didn't work out that way. So it was a bit of a sprint there, right? Last week before that. So I apologize for not grading more frequently. I will get them all done before the end of the semester, certainly. I appreciate your patience, and I hope you learned something. And if you didn't like this book, tell me, because then I'll have to find another one. But that's okay. I'll just find another one. That's okay. I wasn't able to use any of the PowerPoints that I used before. I had used three different textbooks when I taught this class at Fort Belknap. I taught educational psychology there as well. So yeah, thank you for your patience, and I will talk to you in another class. Bye.